Chair, fellow Toastmasters, and most welcome guests. Successful people often attribute their good fortune to being in the right place at the right time. An example of this is the story of Sixto Rodriguez, a man who was called an American zero, but a South African hero. Let's begin his story in a dark, obscure, somber cafe in Detroit, Michigan, USA. The year is 1968. A couple of music producers have been invited to check out this voice, which is reminiscent of Bob Dylan. He's wearing a dark hat and a long, dark, disheveled coat, which looks as though it spent many sleepless nights in the streets. From the dark shadows, you hear his haunting, psychedelic lyrics. This is what you hear.
Sugar man, won't you hurry? 'Cause I'm tired of these scenes. For a blue coin, won't you bring back all those colors to my dreams? Silver magic ships you carry, jumpers, coke, sweet Mary Jane.
This is Sixto Rodriguez, a Mexican immigrant, a demolition and restoration hard laborer, a citizen of the humble district of Detroit. He was signed up by a music company associated with Motown Records, but apparently no one wanted to play Rodriguez on the radio, apparently because of the sound of his name. So by 1971, he was dropped by his music producer, and he vanished, disappeared, was forgotten. Now let's fast forward 25 years, and we are now in South Africa, and the year is 1996. Rodriguez has become a music legend. You see, in 1971, the year when he was dropped by his music producer back in the USA, an American woman traveled to South Africa, bringing with her a copy of his album called Cold Fact. She recommended his album to her friends, and it wasn't available for sale in South Africa, so they made their own copies, as you do. And these copies were passed on and on and on. By 25 years, by 1996, he had become a music legend, and he was elevated to iconic status. His songs, for example, Sugar Man, that we heard a little excerpt of, were banned by the South African government. You may have heard some of the lyrics. Sweet Mary Jane, jumpers, coke. But it was banned by the South African government because it was considered to be revolutionary. Remember that the 70s and the 80s were times of apartheid in South Africa, and liberals who were protesting against the tyranny of this oppressive system saw Rodriguez and his music to be an anthem for the revolution. They saw him to be a beacon for the liberated mind, a guiding force for their activism. And so, in a country with only around 20 million at the time, he sold over 500,000 copies, which was quite a considerable proportion. And remember, though, that in all this time, in all the 25 years, Rodriguez has never actually, ever set foot in South Africa. Not only that, despite the fact that he had become a music legend and that he was elevated to icon status, no one in South Africa knew anything about the personal life of Rodriguez. There were rumors about his death. Some people claimed that he had poured petrol over himself and set himself alight on stage in front of his audience. But others claimed that no, in fact, he had blown his brains out. But no one actually knew Eventually, a couple of his dedicated fans decided to do some detective work, and through a series of lucky coincidences, which you may call serendipity or synchronicity, to their utter amazement, they found Rodriguez alive and well. He's living in the same humble house where he's lived for decades in Detroit. He and his family had no idea that for the previous 25 years, he had become more influential in South Africa than celebrities such as Elvis Presley, the Rolling Stones, or the Beatles. You may be wondering, how is it that he struggled to sell less than 6 copies in the USA, whereas in South Africa he managed to sell over 500,000 copies of his albums without even being aware of it? This phenomenon illustrates the importance of being in the right place at the right time. You may be interested to know that after his rediscovery by 2 of his fans, Rodriguez is still alive and well, and he continues to do music tours around the world. Was he in the right place at the right time? Well, it depends on the purpose. The right place for what? He was definitely in the right place for what was important to him, which was his home and his family. If you try to grow a mango seed in the Arctic or in the desert, you're likely to be disappointed. But if you just happen to throw that mango seed into some fertile soil in the tropical environment, then the tree is likely to grow without any effort on your part, and regardless of whether you care for it or not. And that's what happened to Rodriguez. Because in order to be in the right place at the right time, we don't always have to physically be there. Being in the right place at the right time for what is important to us, the most important thing is that we are just there. Mr. Toastmaster?